when we look at the publicly available data across all financial institutions, what we see is a pretty low arrears rate when it comes to mortgages, relatively modest growth in personal loans as well. And I think the average person in Australia really is actually handling those restrictive interest rates quite well. I mean, a spike in delinquencies, is going to happen here and there. I think what we have at the moment as an economy is a very different set of problems than we did in the decade before COVID. So in the decade before COVID, there were a lot of people who were, more people who are unemployed or going through those changes that do create delinquencies. We don't have that right now because the unemployment rate is still incredibly low at around 4.1%. But what we do have is those high interest rates, which means that people who do have debt and do have a job may be struggling more than they used to. Still, the arrears rates, although they're rising, across the whole of Australia based on APRA data, they're rising from an unconcerning peak. So there are going to be more households who are struggling. That's what happens when interest rates go up. That's what happens when inflation is an issue. But there's probably not so many that the Reserve Bank would cut rates as an emergency measure or as a financial stability measure.
We actually spoke to someone earlier on this week, Adelaide, who said that ironically, if we do see the RBA start to launch into a cutting cycle, say in February of next year, that it could actually boost the Australian dollar, which has been a real slow horse this year, of course, because it might start to help economic growth. Will you feed into that argument?
Look, I think there's definitely some validity to that argument, and economic growth and global trade are obviously two really big factors when it comes to the Australian dollar. We at ANZ consider that the current Australian dollar rate is below its fair value against the USD. So we do think it'll be drifting up over the next year, particularly as the economy grows. We think that in 2025, the Australian economy will grow at double the rate it did of what we expect in 2024. Of course, it's off a very low base, 1.1% for this year, 2.2% for next year, but that does really help things along. And it's just going to be about how much trade there is and how much economic growth there is elsewhere, being such an open-faced economy here.